Anyhow, so Walter arrived a couple of years after me. He's one of those people who's able to do anything and build and construct and just fashion furniture, restore buildings, and he did an incredible job in restoring the old fort. So, and opened up a place that was only open at weekends to begin with called El Fuerte.
Okay.
Walter lived previously, before Cartagena, before elsewhere, in Napoli, in Naples, in Italy. He was a sailor, I believe. I think he sailed his boat over to Cartagena. I mean, there's all sorts of stories, some of which may be true, others may be legend. Anyhow, he opened up his pizza place, which is actually phenomenal.
Yeah, I
Proper,
remember it was like it
yeah,
was legit good. I was
yeah,
surprised that I was
yeah,
in this fort, which was I think also a guy's house. Like
yeah,
he just bought a fort, which
yeah.
seems
For 30
odd to
million
me, but
pesos, he bought a fort.
yeah.
Yeah, back
Okay,
in
yeah. So he bought a
2009.
fort and put a pizzeria in the
And he
fort.
lived upstairs, but now he
Okay,
lives elsewhere. He's
all right.
actually moved out of the restaurant, which is a good thing. Walter
Yeah,
is
right.
a curious guy. He used to sun dry himself naked on the roof after his shower. And so this was a problem for me because all my guests would be sitting on the roof terrace enjoying a cold beer, and there'd be
Yeah.
quite a portly Austrian man in his 70s sun drying.
Okay.
And yeah,
Just say it was like an apparition, or like
yeah, another apparition. But if you get the idea that he looks a bit like Father Christmas,
okay.
and he wears robes that I guess he makes himself. I mean, I think that his fashion sense is taken from Star Wars. I mean,
Yeah. All
um,
right.
anyway, but Walter's a great guy. He's the other foreigner. We know one another. We're friends. We're as the sort of two. Well, he lives there full time, so he gets it. It was great when he moved in because the whole glare of what the gringo was doing moved over, and it was like
Yeah.
mala gente, and they would say el australiano, and you were like, no, he's Austrian, and nobody knew what
Yeah.
Austria was.
It's insane.
And I was the Inglaterrano
Yeah.
as well. So it was the Inglaterrano and the Australiano, and you're like, I'm not, where I'm from is England, he's from Austria. Por allá lejos. so, so it was good
So
to
you
have
became
another.
the safe gringo,
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
kind of the
So,
one who's, yeah, a good sense of humor, and I didn't really get in fights with people. Whereas
yeah.
Walter came in with his very set form of being, but he opened a
Yeah.
restaurant that put us on the map that was one block from the hotel. So
Right.
you can only imagine what that meant for us. He's been definitely a positive influence in terms of the restaurant and so on. And then we have other locals that have opened up places and worked very hard. And again, as I say, they're not going to win Michelin stars, but you get good food and no one gets sick. That's another
Yeah.
thing you have to think about in these far off places.
Yeah. No, I remember the food being very good. Like, I mean, simple and traditional kind of thing, but I
Yeah,
remember it being very, very good. And I love that Commodore Costeño. I still remember eating like fried Boca Chico or something, and it's
yeah,
probably
that's right.
like, and yeah, it was nice and healthy and hearty, and it was just good.
Do you have
And
kibes there?
speak.
Did they travel there?
Who do we
Kibes?
want? Kibbles, yes, we do. We do have kibbles. That's
Mm.
on, like the fast food on the street.
Oh,
Mm.
okay.
It's a nice stroll to the end of the town, and there's a lady that sells the kibbles.
Mm.
Yeah, it's the Arabic, or what you'd say, los turcos, the
Yeah,
influence.
yeah,
One
which is
other
the
thing I
same
remember that
logic of Australianos in Latin.
one
Same
other thing I
logic.
remember, and I'm curious if it's still going on, but like every afternoon, like the plaza, it would be totally dead during the day, but then in the heat. But then in the afternoon, night falls, plaza, everyone gathered around the plaza in like just opera was blaring every day. Like,
Opera?
opera and like classical music. Is that not the norm anymore?
Are you sure it wasn't Vallenato?
Maybe, I don't know. Like, does it sound more like opera? I don't. I remember.
I wish it was opera.
Okay. Okay, maybe my memory is fuzzy, but
Maybe.
yeah, there was definitely some like more
Yeah.
classical style music.
Oh well.
Romantic, let's say.
Let's
Yeah,
say
like
Okay.
more romantic. It wasn't like just fucking blaring reggaeton, like in most towns would have. It
Well,
was kind of
accordion can be like that, right?
Well,
okay.
if it's French, not
Maybe.
Colombian.
But wasn't there like a classical music festival in
We
Mompós?
did have one. I don't know if
Okay,
we've had another one, but we now
okay,
have a jazz festival,
all right,
which is huge. And
okay,
it's awesome because we get international jazz musicians and they play in what are free concerts in the plazas at night. And then
okay,
the semilleros, so the students, the jazz music students from Cartagena come down and they call jazz in the street, and they're just playing. So every time you're walking down, you can hit the saxophone or the violin or something. That's
okay.
in September. But there was a classical music. It may have been going on when you were there, right?
Maybe it was. Maybe that
You
was.
were there also when there was some religious. I can't remember what it is, but it floated down the river. A virgin came down the river. I remember. I remember distinctly you were there for that.
Yeah, I remember some
Yeah,
procession from the
yeah,
church
on the
right
river.
beside the
Yeah.
hotel.
But we have classical, well, particularly Momposino classical music that goes with the processions of Easter week, Semana
Okay.
Santa.
Right. All right.
But the two kiosks that are out front of the Casa Amarilla, which have now mercifully been demolished, I've won the war. We used to blare Vallenato,
Okay.
and a lot of places do. I mean, that's the locally popular music. Even though Mompos is more known for its cumbia music,
Okay.
and the cumbia and the mapale and the chande that all feed into the Barranquilla Carnival come from the region around Mompos. So it's a very musical city.
Okay. All right.
I wish at times that the music wasn't turned up to Colombian, that you could actually listen to the lyrics rather than just distortion.
Right. Right.
But then that is a national thing, and you can go anywhere in the country, and you could go to Salento on a long weekend and not hear yourself think in the main plaza because of the music. So it's just something that happens, and in that respect, I am a grumpy old gringo. Please, can you turn it down?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well. So we were talking about food earlier, and one thing
Yeah,
I
sorry, I
wanted
moved
to
off it.
mention. No, we kind of got off. I got off track talking about classical music, but Julie was on your podcast
Yes.
recently, and the
Had the
in
honor.
like when you posted on social media, like the reactions were funny because Julie said, "What did you say, Julie? Like Colombian food is
It's
subtle."
not
Oh, it's not
bland, it's
bland, it's
subtle.
subtle.
It's not bland,
Yeah.
it's subtle. and but the reactions on social media, I thought I listened to the interview. It was great. And but the reactions on social media, like you put it on Facebook, it was very funny. Like,
Oh,
and I'm assuming that it was a lot of expats in Colombia.
yeah.
And what I found interesting is that most of them, like it seems like they don't like Colombian food. It's like they live there and like they were just kind of complaining about it. Like, is that true? Like, do they
I,
mostly dislike Colombian food?
I don't. I find it so strange. This thing is, because you can hammer Colombian food, some of it, of course you can, but every region has its speciality.
Of
My
course.
issue is that like Colombian food is so heavy, the really traditional stuff. But like we talked on the podcast, it's the new Colombian cuisine, and I know you've written about it, the restaurants as well, Nick. It's phenomenal.
Yeah.
And it's just about knowing where to go and what to eat. So the people who seem to always react, well, I always have a few of the, I call it, they're they're more well-meaning than trolls,
Okay.
but there's always a few that have to think, and they always go, "Oh yeah, I ate the worst pechuga a la plancha," and you're like, "That's just
Yeah,
grilled chicken."
it's grilled
You
chicken,
know,
dude. Like,
you're
what do you
not
expect?
you're not trying
Yeah,
something new. You're not eating the piangua from the Pacific, and you're
yeah,
not. uh, there's been restaurants that have been so much fun for their experimentation, and like one I'm sure we mentioned, Salvo Patria. You're not going there. You're just talking about the blue plate specials that you hate.
yeah. Right. They're just talking like everyday lunch plates, and
Yeah,
that's kind of what they were complaining.
yeah,
But typical Colombian food is amazingly diverse. It is delicious. It's
yes,
not all super heavy, and it's so, yeah, as you said, it's so regional. It's so like, I've had so many wonderful things in the last like couple of years, like in like Guajira and the Cartagena and like the
yeah.
Amazon. It's like there's amazing things, and if you just, I don't know, I was surprised how eager they were to just lump it all to
It,
like a fried arepa with on the street of Bogota, and just
well, you're not.
I
I
don't know.
mean, you're not as a foreigner. You're not expected to eat that every day. I
Yeah,
mean, try it, enjoy what it means, and then
yeah,
go and get what you want. I find it very odd because I think again another of the points is what I love is that the availability of everything and how fresh it is.
Mm.
And I think that to me is because you cook well with amazing ingredients and then the food's great.
yeah,
If you go to a place that's still serving up arroz or the rice from the 3 days
yeah,
ago, it's going to be bad. If you go to a traditional, let's say a very traditional coffee place that has had the coffee in there for 16 hours in a greca, it's going to be bad. Don't go to these
yeah,
places.
Yeah, but I
yeah,
see two things here, and one is not related with food. I think that attitude is, I mean, the two of them actually is, I think that attitude is coming from, extreme positions come lose the nuances, and they lose the nuances because there is not enough information. So this is basically ignorance. When you have
yeah,
extreme judgment about something, it's because you don't know enough about it. Otherwise, because you are missing the context, because you haven't traveled enough. Most of these people probably they haven't traveled as much as you guys have in Colombia. So I think it's not even taste; it's not having enough
yeah,
information about it. And the other one, which is what I call the colonized mind, is if it's our thing, is bad
yeah,
because what is good is what it's in Europe and all this is
yeah, yeah.
changing, but it takes. I mean,
Yeah,
this is
yeah. There's
collective
still,
trauma,
it still
right?
lingers. It still lingers
So they
around the continent,
lingers.
not just
So it
Colombia.
has to do
Yeah,
with that. It's our no, that's
yeah,
bad.
yeah.
It's just not
Right.
not good enough. We are not good enough.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it
it takes
also
a
comes
while.
from within. It also comes from within as well.
Yeah,
Like,
the colonized
Colombians
mind.
or whoever, thinking that something from abroad is always
Yeah,
better.
and it
Yeah,
takes
yeah.
it's changing, and I think that as we were talking in that conversation, Richard, the peace process helps a lot because it gives another face to the country, and we believe in what we are doing. We are proud of that. I mean, of course, we are proud of that. So all these things, are we'll see the consequences of that over time. But it's still, I mean, narco traffic is still our.
Yeah.
It's just so I'm not surprised. I don't think it's odd at all. I think it's very predictable. And the other thing is like we still don't have good Colombian restaurants in the world. A few. So what people know as Colombian food, and when they want to be generous about it, it's like, oh yeah, I tried these amazing beans with some
Yeah.
chicken, maybe. And it's like that's
Yeah.
no, no, forget about erase, delete.
Yeah.
So we don't have all that
Mm.
outside, right? Yet,
Mm.
unless it's a very specific event with a very specific cook that goes and shows piangua or something else, right? So I don't know. It'll take time, I think.
That's Yeah, that's really interesting. Actually, rather than let's say, going to Queens or, I don't know, Brixton or Seven Sisters in London, the Colombian food is for Colombians. It's the standard Colombian fare. It's the, what would you call it? The taste of home. So rather than like, properly experimental new Colombia food. So that's what we need. So you need to talk to your friends, Juliana.
I don't even think it's just like new and experimental. I think it's just like
more diverse too.
Just more regional food. Like I think that's what it's lacking. Not just Colombian food, but every Latin American cuisine that aside of maybe Mexican, that opens up in Europe or the States. It's just the regionality is usually missing. It just becomes this kind of list of national dishes that really don't have that much identity other than just kind of, I don't know, just like civic identity, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, well, the ajiaco has nothing to do with the Caribbean coast. I mean, it's to say here, as you say, this regionality. This has always been, for me, a huge issue for Colombia as to how do you, especially in the tourism industry, they're always looking for the slogan and they're always looking for, the collective image, but there isn't.
Yeah.
There isn't. You can't. They all go, oh yeah, the sombrero volteado, that's our symbol. Well, it isn't. Yes, a lot of people have it, but it doesn't represent the whole of Colombia. And it's because Colombia is so many countries in one. You can say, of course, you can say that about a lot of places, but it feels, obviously, living here and Juliana being Colombian, the regions are so proud of where they are, what they do, and it's quite refreshing. But there is no singular image for Colombia.
But the other thing is like there is always a good version of a dish and a bad one. So if you're using shitty ingredients and if you're, obviously it's going to be bad. So it's all lack of information, I think, and awareness of the context, as you were saying, for using that food in that specific. You don't eat that every day, so it's just.
I don't remember if I mentioned it or not before in our conversation, but it's my Peruvian friend in London. We complained all the time about English food. And I said, well, you can. Of course you can.
Same thing, right?
Yeah, but put it into the context that all food as well, after rationing in World War II, it was about filling your stomach and working. And now, of course, you've got phenomenal restaurants at a price, good restaurants and so on. But I said, what are you eating that's so bad? And he showed me something. He bought a can of meatballs from like a corner shop because it was 50p. And I'm like, I doubt there's any meat in that you want to eat. Let's, I know that Peruvian food I love it. And obviously I love the Peruvian food. I was like, well, again, let's put it into the context and what you paid for that.
Absolutely.
So Richard, I also wanted to mention, talk to you about, you started a publishing company.
Why not?
If you didn't have enough going on at the hotel, journalism, why not just start a publishing company? How did this occur?
I have a lot of jobs that don't really bring me a lot of cash.
Speaking of that, before we get onto that podcast. So you've been at it for 10 years.
Yeah,
that's amazing. You've built this audience for 10 years, and that's why it's like it was fascinating to see how many people were engaged with the post on Julie's episode. And it was impressive. When I went on. I don't think I had ever listened to it. So I went on your podcast, in Mompós when I was there. I think I was probably one of the first episodes ever.
You were in the top 20. You were in the first 20 easily.
Okay, yeah. I don't think I had ever even listened to a podcast at that point. I heard the name podcast somewhere. I didn't know what the fuck it was. And then we just sat down in your house, at the table, had some beer, and it was ridiculously hot, I think. and we just sat there and just talked for a little while, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
But I never thought like to do it myself until a few years ago. But what have you learned in this like 10 years? Like you've kept it, you've stuck with it. Colombia Calling
Yeah.
podcast about it, a podcast about Colombia in English. It had to be probably one of the first podcasts from Colombia.
I it's just been one of those things. Don't get me wrong. There are peaks and troughs when I want to just throw in the towel. Um, but it just keeps going.
Yeah.
And like next week will be episode 527.
Yeah.
It's what I love is that my light went out. It's innately social. That's what I love about it. And I try and do it in a very conversational sense, not unlike what you're doing here, so that the people think that they're drinking a coffee or a beer with us, those who are listening. Obviously, I talk about the bad things in Colombia, and I talk about the good things in Colombia. And I often quote, and I forget his name, there was a war photographer in El Salvador who was killed, but he always said, if you do a bad thing, I'm going to take a photograph of you. And if you do a good thing, I'm going to take a photograph of you. So make sure you do a good thing. And that's how I sort of approached the podcast. I really enjoy it. What I've learned is that I will never stop learning about Colombia. And it's been absolute pleasure to have, a co-host on as well, Emily, who comes from a very solid journalism background. She writes for the New York Times, the Times, and so on. And she's brought in a new understanding and does the news reports, the Colombia Briefing, I think it's called, every week. And that's helped massively because it sort of injected new life into it. There are weeks where people flake out and don't turn up for interviews. Happened yesterday, and you're just like, God, this is too much work for no reward. Yeah. But at the same time, it's kind of like a big, and I don't often like admitting it, but it's like a big branding, isn't it? It's the big thing is I get people to come to Mompós. I get people to read articles. I get people to ask me questions, in the social media or privately about Colombia that they wouldn't ordinarily ask. And that's always been an underlying desire. I wrote to the Australian Times and Sunday Times actually a few days ago because they just did a podcast called Cocaine Incorporated. And of course it starts in Colombia and it's got everything about it. And I wrote to them because they've got a final episode, which is a questions and answers episode. And I said, I introduced myself and I said, I spend a good 90% of my waking life trying to explain some of the complexities in Colombia. And you've done a 7-episode or 8-episode podcast focusing on, obviously, cocaine starting its process in Colombia, but then going into it, for me, what was more interesting was through the UK and then cash and gold smuggling to Dubai and the United Emirates. And that was far more interesting than the old hackneyed story about what's going on in Colombia. But I wrote to them saying it would have done everyone a greater favor to explain better some of the complexities as to why the cocaine trade continues at such a rate, rather than focusing on, again, age-old cliches of Pablo Escobar, age-old cliches. And I think with the podcast, there is an undercurrent at all times. This is not me shouting from the rooftops that it doesn't exist, but there is so much more here. And if we can get messaging out without being, a pro-Colombia brochure, that we are the happiest country in the world and we have the most this and the most that.
Yeah.
I think at the underlying, it's so exciting to me, to get someone on who wants to talk politics, philosophy, and food, like Juliana, or to have someone else who's, last week, for example, is my friend who's from the NASA indigenous people in Cauca talking about how his families are affected in the coffee growing region there because of this rise. But, we're taking coffee. Let's talk about coffee, but there's real issues in Cauca. And I think it's just a question of trying to tell more. But at the same time, it's tough because the image of Colombia, it's going to take generations to change. But I think at the end of it, to talk to someone like, God, this is embarrassing. I forget his name. But the number one ballet dancer for the English National Ballet, from the Pacific Coast, it's just escaped me at this moment. But to talk to him in his house in London and to see how his life has gone is to celebrate Colombia and to celebrate what can be found here. And so, I say, there are the podcasts. I've been described as like the OG of podcasters, which makes me feel very old as an original gangster. But I didn't ever feel like I was doing anything new. I mean, I didn't really listen to podcasts beforehand, and then just sort of fell into it, and it just keeps going. And like I hope to line up for next week the guy who I believe is in Brooklyn, or who did the documentary on Petro during it's called Petro, but during the elections, the president. And I just think it would be so interesting to talk about this. Okay. And there'll be people who hate it because that's the way politics is globally now. There's no debate. And isn't it great that we could perhaps open a debate and open a conversation? And that's, maybe I'm being too pinko, lily-livered and naive about it all. But surely, I'm getting more than 1,000 downloads a week for each new episode, and then of course it drops off. But there's people listening, and I know that the Colombian diaspora a lot now listens. Not in Florida, but in other parts of the US, they do listen. So it's an exciting thing, and it does lead to other work.
Yeah. Okay. So
Fernando Montaño is the guy.
Yes, that's the one. Really nice guy. Thank you. It would have killed me.
No. I wasn't sure. Yeah.
Go ahead. So
I wanted to ask before you, or maybe because you're going to tell us about the publishing house, how you connect all these, because these are ways for you to connect with people, obviously, as you were saying, creating community, but also trying to show a more complex picture of a place, whatever that place is, as reality is, complex, not basic and simple. And I was curious about the writing part of it. And, Nick was asking you about the publishing house, what the writing part of it adds and how you channel all that information, included the entrepreneurship information in all that. Because, what motivates you to keep doing that too?
Well, one of these things will start to pay off.
Let's put it that way.
I keep thinking that as well.
Motivation is my children.
Okay.
But no, I just love having projects. I really do, and I have to sink my teeth into things. I'm not very good at working for other people, which I've learned on several occasions.
Confirm.
I had a job in the Alcaldía de Bogotá. I think it was 12 days under Petro, and then I had a job at one of those risk companies, and I just lasted out a 2 months trial period. So my longest jobs are ones that I do myself. But the motivation is just to keep going. I really enjoy what I do, despite the significantly low return. The publishing house came about in pandemic, like so many other things. We had been stuck in our apartment in Bogota for 105 days. And I know that because I was crossing off each day on the calendar.
like a prisoner.
It was like jail time because it was quite draconian here. And we were applying for permission to get back up to Mompós because there, at very least, it was a lot more sort of relaxed because there's distance, and we could go from one colonial house to another colonial house and always be outside, and my kids could be on their scooters and so on. And it took a long time to get that permission. And then we weren't allowed to stop on the way either, driving up. But anyway, I digress. The publishing houses, we sat down. Obviously, the hotels are, failing. Journalism is based, or the stories are largely based out of Europe and North America. What's happening in the rest of the world is very difficult for me to sell, so that's dropping off as well. So I'm really doing very little, and we start deciding, it's not about earning money, it's about also doing something you're passionate about. And I mean, I studied literature as a kid, and then I studied foreign literature, and when I did my doctorate here in Bogotá, a lot of it was history and literature based, and that was it. And I thought, well, now it's like an extension of what I've been doing with the podcast. Is let's build on this. And I know that there have been people who've written things that have been excellent, and I do think there's a dearth of English language books about Colombia that aren't the obvious books that we all know about. And I just sort of thought, and at the same time I was writing my own experiences in Mompós, which should be finished before the end of the summer.
Okay.
And I just thought, well, rather than I've been trying and pitching this and books to editorial companies and publishing houses in the UK and the US with no success. So screw them.
Yeah.
I'm going to get these out there, but I'm going to also make their own publishing company, so it's not just a vanity project, but to also publish other books, hopefully about Colombia and hopefully about the region. I would love some books or something in English about Venezuela right now. I think
there's nothing, right?
I think it would explain so much from someone on the ground talking about the lack of income, the lack of food, what's going on in the propaganda, and so on. I think it would be phenomenal, and it's been a turbulent few years in Latin America. There needs to be stuff out there. So I've got the first book we did was actually a Spanish book for kids because I just wanted to get out there, and it is called El Año Viejo, and I did have a copy here. And it's a picture book for about 6 and 7 year olds. And my stepmother, who is a professional artist, did the artwork, and Carolina Uribe wrote the book. She already had a book deal with a publishing house here, but they were going to do the imagery in a manga style.
Okay.
And I don't know how you do like New Year's Eve celebrations in Colombia in manga style, running around the block with your suitcases and wearing yellow pants because you want to be wealthy and all these things. And it was much more infantile. Anyway, it sold very, very well, here in Colombia. A Spanish language book. And then the next one, of course, which Juliana has a copy of. I don't know if she's finished it, but it's called Better Than Cocaine, Learning to Grow Coffee and Live in Colombia by Barry Max Wills, who's an Australian. And with his Colombian partner, Adriano, they bought a coffee farm, sight unseen, in Anserma Caldas from London. And that was 12, 14 years ago. And Barry has been a copywriter and a script writer for movies. He's worked with Jeremy Irons and other people way back in the day. And his writing is very, very entertaining. And I have it here just in case.
Okay. Better than
and Adriano, his partner, did the artwork. And it's obviously the title is not well received by Colombians, but it catches the eye of English speakers. And that's where they pick it up. But on the first page, it's dispelled. The whole thing about cocaine is that the issue was, you've bought what? And then Barry responds, a plantation in Colombia. Whatever for, darling. You're not going to go off and live there, are you? No, well, not for now anyway. And what are you going to grow? Cocaine? And that's, that puts that to bed straight away.
Yeah.
But you have to look at that first page, and Colombians don't get past the cover. And I can understand. But the whole book is really a celebration and a very ethnographic and personal, it's a memoir of living in Colombia, and it's doing well. It's doing well, and I'm in conversations with a publishing house in London, and maybe one in Australia, where Barry is originally from. So it's, all things are moving forwards. These things take time.
Yeah.
Barry would like Russell Crowe to play him in the movie, and he'd like Adriano, his partner, to be played by Diego Luna, I think. So we will see.
All right. And you have a book as well.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
It's in the final phases, and it's called the Mompós Project.
Okay. No, but I thought you had another book too.
Oh yeah, the other one is Colombia at a Crossroads. Well, that one, because it's at the printers at the moment here.
Oh, okay.
I've forgotten about it. The Colombia at a Crossroads, a historical and social biography. It is not a guidebook. It is not an academic book. I've had gifted essays by some experts. Andre Gomez Suarez, who is one of the top academics in peace for Colombia, but lives in England, put an essay in there. He's got a doctorate from various places. He put an essay in about the peace accords. An expert in economics, professor at another university, also donated an essay, and a few of my own essays. But it was an idea of actually a bit more focusing on Colombia's history, focusing on society and culture, and getting it out there. Because when I was doing the rounds of the bookshops here in Bogota, pitching the books to say, listen, would you like them? And actually the majority said yes. Mm-hmm. I was at the Fondo de Cultura Económica, so the Mexican-owned chain in downtown Bogota, and they said, listen, what we really need, and what every day someone is asking for, a book in English about Colombian history and Colombian politics. So I wrote it.
Okay.
But I think really I'd been writing it for a decade.
Right.
Because I've been collecting information and studying and so on. And of course, there'll be many things that aren't, it is, subjective. Of course it is. But again, it's doing well. We got a really beautiful review from the Latin American Review of Books. So that was nice. But the print copy should be ready in Colombia within a week or so. So I'll be going
that's
down
exciting.
Throwing at places to try and make some more money, or some.
That's great.
And the guy I mentioned, Andre Gomez Suarez, has written his memoir in English of growing up in Pasto in the 90s, and his parents being militant members of the Unión Patriótica. And they were high-level ones. And so Andre grows up seeing this in his house, and people of high rank like Efraín Cepeda and Aida Bello and all these people who end up then being assassinated, and how it affects his upbringing. And it's a it's an amazing read explaining again about a bit more about the southwest of Colombia, Pasto, Nariño, and of course a political chapter unknown outside of Colombia. It really is unknown, the Unión Patriótica. And so I was like, yeah, we'll be getting that out for the book fair next year. So onwards and upwards.
All right. That's exciting, man.
Yeah. It's exciting.
Great,
Like my wife
Richard.
says, it's like you have to contribute. And if you're not contributing somehow, so I hide in my office here and it sounds like I'm working.
Oh, man. Julie, is there anything else you wanted to talk about?
No, I'm looking forward to this other book, and we'll talk because I have to
Oh, yeah.
travel to work soon. So yeah.
And that's my one.
The Mompós project. So
great.
that's like
This
it's
is-
just like your life in the town.
Yeah, but
ghosts,
the
nudists.
ghosts, the paramilitaries, the
Yeah,
politicians, the family, the witchcraft. Yeah, I've got everything in there. Sometimes it's hard to believe when I read through it, but I've taken other books and I've tried to put it into context as well with what's going on in the country at that time. And also I found all of the old diaries of people who used to travel in the 1800s along the rivers. And of course, you got Englishmen, Brits, Americans, and they were all educated to write diaries, and they're the most beautiful things to read. Although when you read about the British Legion and these Scots, they're always shooting the birds from the boat. They're going, "Oh yeah, I killed the most wonderful bird. It was grey and blue and had plumes. Not great eating." Typical. But you see, Mompós was so pivotal and important on the river that it had an American consulate.
Really?
At that time, and an American and a Brit were both jailed for having an opinion on local politics. We're talking about 1890 or 1900. So they were jailed, and the American ambassador and the consulate in Bogotá got involved and got the American out. Whitaker was his name. But the Brits didn't get involved in and their subject died in the prison in Mompós. And curiously, the original cemetery is probably at the end of my house. So he might well be buried there where you and I spoke.
All right. Well,
all those years ago.
Yeah.
okay. It comes full circle.
Are you
now.
going to
Like,
have a release event?
I'd
For the
like
book?
to. It's quite an expensive one. It's quite an expensive thing. So if I do it, it might just be in my apartment.
Okay.
There'll be plenty of wine and beer, but
Okay.
are you coming back then? Will you be back soon?
Yeah, I'll tell you about it. Yeah, but I have to be in different cities because of work, but I'll be in Bogota for some days, and well, someone else is going too. I don't know if that person
oh,
wants to say
yeah,
something about it.
eventually. I think so.
Well, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Quite obviously.
Are you not? Are you not? Are you okay?
No, what? Not leaving Colombia. I will go to Mompós for a few weeks, but I'm not leaving Colombia.
Oh, we'll talk.
All right. Yeah.
Yes.
Now, you're a lifer, man. Right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
look. You see the grey hair.
Yeah.
All right, Richard. It's
No,
been an
thank you so
absolute
much.
pleasure.
I mean,
Yeah.
you are contributing. Of course, you are. So
I
thank you.
try. It's a real pleasure. I like to talk. Could you tell?
As a Colombian, but also as someone that understands, what struggling with projects you believe in is, and Nick too. So thank you for that too.
Yeah.
No, you guys are awesome. I think I'm still immensely grateful to Nick for the piece in the New York Times, which we have framed on the wall.
Oh,
so,
okay, cool. I need to come see it. Like I want to come back one day.
It's yellowing a bit, but it's there on the
Okay.
wall.
All right, that's good.
Legendary
really cool.
by now.
And
It was anthologized in like
yes, I have the book.
Oh, okay, cool. Okay.
I have the book in the New York Times, like travel stories.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, I
Okay,
have the
so
book, and it was nice.
hopefully that ages better.
That's
But
great.
no, I mean that really for a US market put us on the map. I mean, it really did. So we
No,
started getting.
as I said, it's one of my favorite stories. It was just like it just kind of like hit all the right notes. And I think it like and Garcia Marquez died like I think right before it was published too. So
It was
like
around
kind of,
there, wasn't it?
So they were like, yeah, just the timing of everything just kind of fell into place.
It's been 10 years, so it was 2014 when he died.
Yeah, I think the story came out after, but he was still alive when I visited. But
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so.
All right, man. Anyway, we could talk all day, but
thank you both. If you are in Bogota, look me up. I live in this well-heeled neighborhood near to Juliana.
Definitely.
Thank you again.
We'll talk soon.
See ya.
Thank you so much again.
Ciao.
No, a pleasure. And I'm sorry about the computer.
All right, but I'm stopping now. Yeah, let's